Hello and good day I bid to you. In this video, our team will discuss about a story titled Parson'S Pleasure written by Roald Dahl. We will first introduce our team members. Starting with me, my name is Wan Muhammad Haris bin Hasmadi and I will be discussing about plot and conflicts.
Hello, and my name is Adisha Kaiman and I will be presenting the character and characteristic.
Hello, my name is Amir Rashidi bin Masar and I will be presenting about styles and symbol of Parson'S Pleasure.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Zuhaili. I will be talking about irony and the point of view.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Aida Haikal and I will talk about mood, atmosphere and setting.
Hello, my name is Waizan Afif. I will be discussing about theme and purpose.
May you enjoy our video.
Now we will show you our contents. Now we will continue with our presenter, Wan.
Hi, my name is Wani Zahan Afif and today I will be presenting the theme of this short story, which is Parson'S Pleasure written by Roald Dahl. Okay, the first theme of the short story is the greediness and selfishness to pursue wealth and frauds that happen in our daily life. For example, the main character, Mr. Cyril Boggis, is so selfish as he keeps lying and convincing people with his sweet-talking ability to buy antique, valuable furniture at lowest price so that he can earn huge profits by selling them expensively. This short story also revolves about the persistence to achieve dreams. For example, the main character, Mr. Boggis, goes to countryside every Sunday to find antique furniture, but then he will buy them cheaply and sell to the people expensively so that he can be rich and famous at the same time. The purpose of this short story is to persuade. The author wants to persuade the readers to be honest in business. For example, we can see that how author portrays Mr. Boggis. He deceives his customer by selling the furniture expensively to gain wealth. Second is, the author wants to persuade readers to be aware when dealing with people. The author tells about the dark sides of human nature. For example, the author describes how Mr. Boggis gained his wealth, which is by deceiving his customer.
Now, Adi will continue with character and characteristics.
Protagonist of this short story is Mr. Cyril Boggis. First of all, I will tell you about the characteristic of Mr. Cyril Boggis. He is an antique furniture seller who pretends and dresses up as a clergyman so that people will trust him and allow him to enter their houses to look at their furniture. He also tricks the owner of the house into selling him valuable furniture very cheaply by making them to think the piece of furniture is worthless. Next characteristic is he is intelligent and has a wide knowledge of antique furniture. By just observing a furniture, he can determine well whether it is an expensive and well-built furniture. As example, while wandering in Rumin's house, he identified an antique commode which was a lot. Next, he is a cunning man and can trick people by his words and actions. As example, when he wanted to prove that the antique commode was a replica, so he can bought it for a very cheap price. He obtained a screw from the commode and exchanged a machine-made screw from his pocket to fool Romans. As a result, he obtained the commode for a very cheap price. Next, I will tell you about the antagonist. There are three people who play the role of major characters. Rumins, Bird and Cloud. Mr. Rumins and his son Bird are local farmers. Cloud is their neighbor who had dropped in on Rumins in the hope of getting a piece of pork. They are suspicious about Mr. Boggis' interest in furniture, but still Mr. Boggis tricks them into selling of a rare genuine commode for $20 by proving the commode is a replica which has no price. Next, Rumins, Bird and Cloud makes a foolish action which caused Mr. Boggis to despair. Cloud suggested that the whole furniture will not fit in a car. Cloud gave an opinion to Rumins where parsons do not have van and will back out and in the deal if he do not get the whole furniture. In addition, Mr. Bogies just want the legs of the comet. Therefore, Cloud suggested they cut off the comet's leg to help Mr. Bogies. For Romance, he is an old and stumpy man with a white frog mouth and shifty eyes. He is owner of a farm. He has a dynamic characteristic where he looks foolish at first, but throughout the bargaining with Mr. Bogies, his intelligence in asking questions make Mr. Bogies worry and could reveal Mr. Bogies' intention on tricking them. For Bert, he is Rumin's son. He is tall and young. For Cloud, the shorish, flat-faced man with a narrow corrugated brow and immensely broad shoulders lives near Rumin's farm, so he is a neighbor of Rumin's and Bert. Next is the minor character. The minor character is an old woman. Mr. Bogies meet the old woman in a farm. She is a gigantic woman with set of enormous, slightly yellow teeth. She is very rude and suspicious of Mr. Bogies' appearance at first. As time goes on, Mr. Bogies' sense of humor makes she believe him. She gives the permission to Mr. Bogies to wander around the house. She is actually kind and friendly, where she becomes friends with Mr. Bogies easily.
Moving to one Harris.
Hi, my name is Haris, and today I will present to you about plot and conflict. So first, I will present to you about plot. So plot is the key moment or important scene in the story. Moment that affect the story directly or indirectly. So plot is divided to 5 different stages. The first stage is the exposition. The second one is rise in action. The third one is climax. The fourth one is falling action. And the fifth one is resolution. So, here are some plot from Parson'S Pleasure, written by Roald Dahl. The first plot is Mr. Bogies' routine Sunday drive. So, every Sunday, Mr. Bogies will drive around London in search of any farmhouse or cottages that seem to have any valuable antiques in there. So one day, Mr. Bogies drove up Brill Hill with his old station wagon. Up there, he scanned the area of Brill Village, searching for farmhouse and any old house that may contain valuable antique furniture. He marked the farmhouse that he can get to on that day on the great map he created. He then drives to the houses and tried to have a look around to see either there are anything valuable for him. There was no one at the first house he visited, and there was nothing special on the second house he visited. When he visited the third house, the farmhouse, he found an antique commode that is very valuable in the antique furniture industry. So, next, the second plot, how Mr. Bogies' passion sparked. He was driving around London on a Sunday. Suddenly, his car broke down. He stopped at the side and saw an old house there. He walked to the house and asked for a jug of water from the owner. As the owner getting him a jug of water, he saw an antique armchair inside the house. He asked the owner either it was for sale or not. At the first, owner refuses to sell, but later, after a few bargaining, he agreed to sell it. Mr. Bogies bought the armchair at a very cheap price and will sell it at a very high price. Next, the third plot, where he found the antique commode. So, Mr. Bogies then drove to a farmhouse without expecting any valuable items there. There, he met 3 men. He met Ramins, Cloud, and Bert. So, Ramins is the owner of the farmhouse. Bert is the son of Ramins, and Cloud came to Ramins' farmhouse to ask for some pork. Then, Mr. Bogies introduced himself to the 3 men. They led Mr. Bogies into the farmhouse. So Mr. Bogies wandered around the farmhouse, not expecting to see anything valuable. Suddenly, his heart stopped when he saw an antique commode painted in white. After that, he started bargaining the price of the commode with Ramins. At first, Ramins doesn't want to sell the commode, but after being tricked by Mr. Bogies, he agrees to sell it. He agreed to sell it at a very cheap price. It's not even 1/5 of the exact value. Mr. Bogies then happily getting his car, thinking that the antique commode was his. Second, I will present about conflict. So, conflict is the moment that protagonist was against either itself the nature, the character, or limiting circumstances. There's two types of conflicts. The first one is external conflict, which is protagonist against nature or the character limiting circumstances. The second conflict is internal conflict, where it's protagonist versus himself. Okay, here's the first conflict in the story. The first conflict is an internal conflict where Mr. Bog is trying to hide his excitement. So, as Mr. Bog is wandering around the Ramin's house, he saw an antique commode that is very valuable in the antique furniture industry. So, when he saw this, he tried very best not to show his excitement to Ramin's bird and cloud, as they were suspected that the commode worth more than they think. Next, the next conflict is Mr. Boggins trying to deceive Ramins. So, Mr. Boggins bargained with Ramins on the antique commode. Mr. Boggins lied to Ramin, saying that the commode was a remake and only worth a few pounds. He used every trick he had under his sleeve to convince Ramins. Ramins was sturdy with his stance, saying that the commode was more expensive. It was more valuable than the price of the commode is higher than what Mr. Boggins has to offer, because he has an evidence showing that it was made in the golden era. So Ramins and Mr. Boggins keep on arguing, saying to determine what's the actual price of the commode. After a while, Ramins agrees with Mr. Boggins' offer, because he was annoyed with Mr. Boggins, and also he doesn't think that the commode really worth any much. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, next to Suhaili's presentation.
Now, I'm going to talk about the point of view and the irony that exists in the Parson'S Pleasure short story. First, I'm going to talk about the point of view. Point of view, or in short POV, refers to the one who is telling the story or who is narrating the story. The point of view that exists in the Parson'S Pleasure short story is the third person point of view, which is the storyteller or the person who is telling the story is not involved at all in the event that happened in the story itself. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the irony. The irony is the figure of speech in which words are used in such a way that their intended meaning is different from the actual meaning of the words. And it may also be a situation that ends up in a quite different way that what is generally anticipated. In simple words, it is the difference between appearance and reality. Okay, the irony that involved in that exists in the Parson'S Pleasure short story is a situational and verbal irony. I'm going to give an example for each the irony that is existed in the Parson'S Pleasure short story. First one is verbal irony. Okay, the example is there is a line in the short story that Mr. Baggins said that they were definitely not for sale, but just out of curiosity, just for fun, how much will give. This implies the verbal irony in the short story. Okay, next, the situational irony. Okay, there is also a line, the example is, the man was staring at this queer moon-faced clergyman with the bulging eyes, not quite so suspiciously now because he did seem to know a bit about his subject. Okay, this implies the situational irony. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Now, we'll move to ID's presentation.
Okay, now we're gonna talk about Parson'S Pleasure settings. This short story takes place in England around 1950 or 1960. Okay, now I'm gonna tell you a little detail about what is shown on the slide. Okay, Brill Hill. This is where Mr. Bogies drives up there and find 5 farms and one big white gorgeous house on the other side of the hill. He drives up there during a summer. That is a weekly routine for Mr. Bogies. He drives up there to find more to get the view of the city, so he can spot where is potential place that have what he finds for. Next, the King's Road, Chelsea. This is where Mr. Bogies will known as a dealer. Village of Brill. At the village of Brill, there is a farmhouse. This is most of the story take place. Next, we move to mood and atmosphere. Okay, the mood in this short story is quite dull in the beginning because the author tries to portray the characteristic of Mr. Bogies. Then the story starts to thrilling when he discovers the invaluable cupboard in Mr. Ramin's house. And the readers might feel a little bit uneasy at that part because of this is where Mr. Bogies tries to deceive Mr. Ramins to sell the antique furniture, the antique cupboard, with a low price. Mr. Bogies is taking advantage of Mr. Ramin's lack of knowledge about the antique furniture. And then lastly, Mr. Ramin and his son take apart the cupboard. This is most tense part, most thrilling part in this short story. That's all from me.
Last but not least, Amirul's presentation.
Hello, my name is Amirul Rashidi bin Mansur, and now I will continue about the style that the writer used to write Parson'S Pleasure. The styles mean the words type, paragraph in type, and sentence type that the writer used to write Parson'S Pleasure. Okay, the first one is colloquial. Colloquial means language used in familiar type and ordinary conversation. The writer used ordinary language when writing this short story in order to make the story easier to understand. And also, the writer used conversational style. The writer also include a few conversational in the short story. For example, the conversation of Mr. Bogies negotiating the price of antique chairs in the woman's house. And also, the writer often use short sentences in order to make the story easier to understand. While the writer also use flashback style, as we can see when Mr. Bogies remember how the first time he get the furniture very cheap. Stop. Hello, and now I will continue about the symbolism used in Parson'S Pleasure. Symbolism is a literary technique that adds meaning to the short story by using an event or a symbol, an object, to represent something else. It could be cultural symbol, which certain object bring meanings about the environment, or intangible object, which used as a subtle focal point of the story, or personal symbol that can be anything, even a bizarre symbol. In Parson'S Pleasure, most of the symbol is a cultural symbol. The first one is the farmhouse and cottages used in the short story. It describes that the house shows that Mr. Bogies get most of the antique furniture from a countryside area. The second one is Queen Anne's house. This represents a house that have an elm tree in its yard. And the final one is old station wagon that used by Mr. Bogies. Mr. Bogies always use his old station wagon to carry his furniture. This shows that Mr. Bogies is an average man that lived through the profit that he gained from reselling the furniture. That's all from me, thank you.
So that's the end of our video. The lesson that we get from the story Parson'S Pleasure is that don't be so greedy and always speak the truth, or otherwise it will backlash ourselves. That's all from us. Thank you.